So I'm Marc Dowd, and I've been working for Forrester for about 8 years. And what Forrester does is we really gather data, both from consumers and from enterprises, about how people are using technology and how that's going to affect things now, or is affecting things now, and how it's going to actually affect things in the future. And so what I'd like to do is take a few minutes to talk to you about not just the details as a supplier would do, but more the general view. What's happening? What are your colleagues actually doing? What are they worrying about? And also, what's just changing in the world? You know, what is actually going on out there? And this obviously is an independent view. Right, so I'll start off with this. For those of you that don't recognize this picture or haven't seen it before, this is actually the inauguration of Pope Benedict XVI in 2005. And as you can see, quite a lot of people. Now, I'd like to contrast this with the next picture, this one. This is the inauguration last year of our current Pope. And you might spot one significant difference. There's an awful lot of mobiles going on there. Mobile tablets, mobile phones. People have actually taken what must be for them a really spiritual moment, and they're capturing it on their phones. And you think, okay, but they didn't do this before. What's changed? Well, what's changed is people have integrated mobile into their lives. They've actually done what we call the mobile mind shift. And the mobile mind shift is when for the terms of what we're doing here, more than just taking photographs, it's actually expecting that my mobile phone will help me do what I want to do at the moment that I want to do it. So it's actually the expectation that I can also get what I want at my moment of need. This is something which, I'm sure all of you do when you're going home on the train. Perhaps you're looking to see when the next train home is. It knows where you are. It knows where you want to go. It can tell you the information in a very, very easy way, based on what it knows about you, what you've already told it. This expectation is out there amongst consumers right now. But be aware that this expectation is also going to come into the enterprise. So be careful that you don't try and fix the problems of today alone. It's the problems of tomorrow that you actually need to be thinking about as well, because those are the ones that, if you fix today's problems next year, you're going to be well behind. You've got to think about what's coming. And this is what we see is actually coming your way, or in the direction of all of us. So these mobile moments really are a combination of things: the applications, the devices, how people are thinking about these differently, and of course, how companies are providing this information. And really, some of the stats that we have are pretty huge. If you look at smartphone users, 62% of mobile users expect a mobile-friendly website. 42 expect to find a mobile app when they need it. Don't forget, there are millions of people out there putting out apps onto the app stores. In fact, we predict that it's going from about, on the Apple App Store alone, it's going from about 1 million apps to 10 million apps in 3 years' time. So there's going to be an app for absolutely everything. And are you going to be able to manage all these apps? Are you going to be able to know that there isn't a security flaw in there that's getting through and getting at your data? That's going to be a little difficult. It's very, very challenging. On top of that, there's also the devices. As we've seen, there's a plethora of devices, and as Nick mentioned earlier, there's different form factors. It's all getting a lot more complicated. In fact, we see that smartphones are growing from 1.2 billion people to 2.3 billion people in the next 3 years. That's almost doubling in 3 years. This is the fastest adoption we've ever seen. This is really, really important. So you have to be thinking about the problems you're going to have in terms of just quantity in a few years' time. The good news, of course, is up here, probably for most of us in this room, is job security. There's going to be an awful lot of work to be done in this area. But I'm sure that your organizations aren't really that happy about paying the amount of money that's going to take. We estimate that it'll take some $1.3 trillion to actually manage all this sort of data that's happening at the moment. So there's an awful lot of work, large numbers going into this. So don't just focus on today, focus on what is coming next, would be my message. Okay, so what is happening today? Well, this is what we see. According to our surveys, because we do a lot of surveys, 70% of enterprises are providing more mobile support see themselves providing more mobile support over the next 12 months. We also see that information workers are choosing their smartphones much more themselves. So to the gentleman before's BYOD type of message, a lot of people are just going out and doing it. They have the technology, and they're thinking, why don't I do this for myself? The problem is they're also thinking, actually, these applications that the business is giving me, they're not good enough. I'll go and use Dropbox, or I'll go and use Evernote, or I'll do what I need to do my job. The problem with that really comes down here. So on average, 15% of employees are accessing sensitive data and keeping it on their devices. This is a nightmare. 15% of your corporate data is out there. You don't actually know where it is. You can't protect it at this stage. It's really quite scary, because it won't take an awful lot of real challenges around this sort of data before all the regulators start really clamping down on this. And they're not going to clamp down on the well, they might clamp down on the individuals, but actually it's going to be you guys who are going to have to do something to fix this. And you're going to have to be ahead of the game to make sure that it works. Okay, so what are the concerns? Where do I start? Well, security is actually probably the point where most people are starting right now. What we see is that over the next 12 months, 77% of people who are probably in your situation are looking at changing their security policies, changing the way they work around security. This is job one for most people. This is compounded by the fact that actually we need to bring more devices, more people, that everything's just coming at us all the time. That's job two, is there's just more of it. People want access to our data in much more mobile ways. And it goes on. Okay, so what about the geographies? What about the different areas? There's a lot of problems ahead, I'm afraid. Okay, let's look at some of the specific problems in the EU. Now, the EU is different from other geographies. It's particular from the USA. It's a lot more difficult in a lot of ways. We have lots of roaming. We have lots of different countries. It doesn't work quite so easily. And what we find is that for the moment, for the next couple of years, bring your own contracts can be really, really expensive for you, especially if people are roaming. They're going out, they're using their own data. If something goes wrong, they may run up huge bills. Less likely now. But what actually happens is if stuff goes wrong, they cease being effective, or they're running around trying to find Wi-Fi networks and stop off in coffee shops. This isn't really the way that businesses should be working. We should actually be able to provide a much more seamless environment. So this chaos is going to get worse, and the employees are going to be blaming you, probably. This isn't acceptable. It's not going to be acceptable in the future. Okay, look at employment laws. Now, in a lot of countries, in particular France and Germany, if you have a BYOD policy, well, you can't really, because that's not really acceptable. You're not allowed to access someone's machine. They have their own machine. You're not allowed to give them give them machines or put your stuff on their machines. It gets really, really complex from a legal environment in certain businesses. So if you're multinational, be aware of this. It doesn't work across the EU. And really, the only way of doing that is to have corporate devices. It's also true in terms of data privacy. Data privacy, as you know, is increasingly important, and some jurisdictions within Europe are saying, actually, we're not going to allow you to do this. This corporate data has to stay within your corporate environment. You can't just go putting it on anybody's machine. You've got to be crazy. And as a result, corporate-owned machines, again, the only way forward. That's going to be difficult. It means that all these shiny devices that people are bringing in, you can't actually use them, and you won't be able to allow them to use them for work. But they want to, and they're probably going to. If they can find one of these 10 million apps that will get around you, they're going to do it anyway. Okay, so looking at a couple more barriers. Unfortunately, tax laws. So there's a budget model problem. In some countries, if you go out and you say, okay, we'll give people a stipend, we'll give them an amount of money every month. That doesn't work really, because if they go over the stipend, the unions in some countries demand that you pay them back. And the tax offices in other countries, if they don't use all their stipend, they say, oh, well, this is benefit in kind, we want some money from that. So what that actually means is that you have this administrative nightmare where every single phone call is being counted by someone. That's either you or some staff or the people going through the expenses organization. So trying to do it yourselves really isn't an option. I think you have to look at some sort of technology to help you with this sort of stuff. Users, of course, can't really look after themselves in terms of security. They don't know. They're not there to be updating their operating system every 5 minutes. They're not there to be your security officers. And in a lot of ways, they're not going to. They're going to try and get around it because they have jobs to do. This is your job. Security, that's your job. You have to secure the data, even against your own people. In fact, at Forrester, we believe that this isn't just true of mobile. We have to have, going forward, a zero trust model of security because there is no firewall anymore with mobility. Mobility just goes straight through the firewall because people are bringing in Wi-Fi devices. And they need to be able to connect. Increasingly, they're going to be connecting. So what that means is you have to actually look at the data itself. You have to secure the data at any particular point throughout the life cycle. Okay, and then business continuity. Ultimately, if you have a user device, or let's say thousands of users' devices of all sorts of different sorts, do you have the staff to actually manage and look after and support these people? The answer is probably not. If they come to you and say, I'd like one of these 10 million apps, do you know what that app does? Do you know how secure it is? Who knows this sort of stuff? Well, your staff aren't ready for this sort of questions. They can't support that sort of quantity. But at the same time, there is no other support for these people because if they are on an iOS device and something goes wrong, they have to go to an Apple store in whatever country they have to be. They have to book ahead 3 days in advance. So what I'm saying is corporate continuity really falters in this area. If, as we all are going to do, we rely on mobile, not just for email, but actually for so much more, it's not going to work if it breaks down for 3 days. We can't run our businesses on this. And some businesses are making these moves. So, what to do about it? Well, BYOD, we believe, isn't really the answer, because there are too many wide-ranging problems in Europe. It's fine in the States, but not here. So really you have a couple of choices. You could roll out a choose-your-own device, which is a limited subset which the organization actually controls. So you say, okay, we realize you need to do a job which is more than we can support, but here's some devices that you can use. Increasingly, we're also going to see a horses for courses approach, which is actually looking at your employees and working out what they need to do. An employee-centric view of the world will actually help you a lot, because then you're figuring out what they need to do and what devices are best for them to do it with and what is secure. So you can make recommendations. In fact, more than recommendations, you can give them the applications and the technology that they need to do. When you start thinking about it like this, BYOD becomes an abrogation of responsibility. It's like, yeah, it's okay, it'll be fine, go do it, we'll sort it out later. A lot of my corporate clients are going, actually, that's only going to be fine until something really goes wrong, somebody gets bitten, and then the whole thing's going to clamp down. All the regulators are going to clamp down on us. So why go after a short-term scenario? It's really not a good idea. Okay, so as the previous speaker was speaking about, he was talking about mobile device management, and we suggest that really it's the only way to go. Having said that, at the moment, it's pretty limited. So you have containers, and you have wrapping of applications. But those are limited in terms of the applications that you can use, email and some other applications, and you're at the mercy of your supplier to bring those applications into the container or to wrap the security around those applications. Don't forget, 10 million applications. There's going to be somebody in your organization that says, look, this application here, just what I need, and I need it now. Okay, that doesn't really necessarily work. It's going to go slowly. So what we're seeing is the next move is really enterprise device management. And the gentleman before me mentioned this. This is how we at Forrester see the world going. And it really falls into a number of different areas. So in order for this to work, what you need to be looking at is a security model that actually works not just on the device, but right the way across. If you remember, I was talking about security being of the data. Well, the data's at rest on the device and the data's traveling across the network as well. You want an environment where you can actually manage security right the way across the access to that device. So take what the gentleman from AirWatch was saying and move it forward, push into these other areas. Now, support is another area of big concern. We realize that people aren't going to be able to manage this, or rather than people, your staff are not going to be able to manage the plethora of things that people need. You need to harness the ability to take people and allow them to do it themselves. So a corporate app environment, app store, which allows them to choose which applications they want to use out of your choice is really the way to go around this. So you need to give them support which they can do for themselves. So even if it's a corporate device, maybe they have to have the ability to wipe that device when they realize they've lost it, rather than panic calls in the middle of the night to try and delete this device that's just been stolen. Looking at experience, and this is actually the most important thing. People are people, and if the experience isn't good, they're not going to use it. So if the passwords are difficult, they'll find another way. If the application you're looking at isn't responsive and doesn't take into account where they are and what they're trying to do, they'll find something else. So you're stuck in this situation where on the commercial side, they're wonderful apps that will do amazing things. And if you don't really keep up, people will migrate and take all your security with them. So that's one of the areas that you've got to really worry about when you're looking at an EDM supplier. The way forward? Well, we actually think that all of this is wrong, unfortunately, because what you need to do is you need to understand what it is that your employees need to do. You need to focus a little bit more on what those jobs are that they're doing. And you need to open up from just thinking about mobile device management, actually, to the whole world of device management. Because in a few years, mobile, rather than just being a second screen, for a lot of people is going to be the main screen that they use. They're going to be using a tablet, or they'll be using a phone, or a rugged device, rather than a PC as well. And so going after two separate strategies is really losing. What you need to be looking at and pushing for is getting to a digital workspace delivery system, where actually everything is delivered according to that person's needs, rather than separating out mobile and thinking, well, I'll crack that one. Because, as we all know, people are moving for a lot of things at home away from PCs, away from email. That's also going to be happening in our environments. So really, I'm run out of time. I really like to thank you very much. Hopefully we brought you some ideas. I'm not too scary about the way the world is going. I'm really sure that during the rest of the day, you'll get to discuss a lot of these topics in much more detail. What I wanted to do was bring you some actual hard facts, some data, and a little bit of analysis, which is what we at Forrester actually do. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Mark.